you seem to be way stronger than I am. I mean, I have watched you just white knuckle your weight loss journey a few times. I've watched you embraced this keto path of just being so successful at reducing calories and having effective weight loss through the keto um lifestyle, dietary choices, whatever it should be called or is preferred call of it. Like, where are you right now with your? Well, so first of all, let me just
Yeah.
say welcome. Let me just say
hmm
welcome, Gormy. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, pal.
hmm Well, I'm glad
So
to be here, and I think, and it's funny because whether you include it or not, something you were talking about a few minutes ago was, operating from a place of desperation, and I want you to know first and foremost, like I relate to that, and I think so many more people relate to that than you're probably aware of. Like, I think that is something, especially because there's a different, and now I'm going to be the person that tangents like 18
I hope
different
you do.
places
I
from
hope you
one
do
point.
because it's actually
But
really
it,
good to listen to on
right.
somebody
But
else.
I think, but I honestly think, so one thing to think about, like, because I also want to address, what you were asking about me as well. But I think there's something to be said for the fact that the path of managing weight loss and life and health and fitness and all of these things that make up a lifelong journey with no finish lines. Let's get all the cliches out of the way. There's no finish lines, there's no being done, there's none of that. That it's a different situation when you're coming from that place of 500, 600 or more pounds and working through the fact that you knew you were in a place where death was imminent, whether you were dealing with health crises or not. That, depending on, at 40 years old, at 30 something years old, at 50 years old, I'm getting up there in age, weighing over 400, weighing over 500 pounds. It's not if something's going to happen, it's when is something going to happen. And I think that creates that place of, like, I always talk about, I go back to, 2017, my why for getting started was I wanted to live. I felt like I was in a place where I wasn't sure I was going to wake up every morning. And, I've told the sob story of keeping a letter by my bed for my family in case I didn't wake up that just said, I don't want you to, don't mourn me. I was happy, blah, 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 all this BS. And I don't gloss over that. So for anyone who's never heard me talk about that before, it's not like I'm being flip. But the reality is you come to a point where you realize you either do something or you're going to die. And the amazing thing is, by making changes and starting to eat better, whatever that path looks like, and move our bodies more, we eventually hit a place where we don't feel like we're going to die, overnight anymore. Like, you get to that place where you're out of the crisis, you're out of the red zone. You're not in the green yet. You're out of the red and you're kind of in the orangey, headed towards yellow, I guess, if we're using common nomenclature. And that's when, comfort starts to sit in. And it's like, well, maybe, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it's things aren't as bad as they were before. So maybe I can be a little, this is exhausting what I'm doing. So maybe I can relax a little bit. Maybe I can allow X, Y, or Z, or maybe I could I think one of the biggest things, we could tangent on this for an hour, is the number of times in my own life and the lives of people I work with is how great we are at convincing ourselves that something that truly was a problem wasn't really a problem, and maybe that wasn't the problem to begin with, and maybe what I've been doing has fixed that problem. So I can dive right back into that thing. And that usually comes with, like, managing foods that we have trouble managing. Like, yes, I used to eat, 4 Big Macs at a time, but maybe now, for some reason, just having one Big Mac is going to feel fine. Like, I've been working at this for 6 months. I'll probably be fine, and never was. Like, it's a fallacy that we convince ourselves of. Like, we get to that place where we start to convince ourselves that the comfort and the urgency is gone. And, that's why it's important to refocus purpose and all of those fun, coachy things to say about it. But, when you talk about, like, your perspective on me, my journey, my work, it's like, from the inside, I don't feel any of that. Like, I feel like there's times that I'm winning and there's times that I'm not winning, and there's times where I struggle and there's times where I don't struggle, and, different things. People love to say life gets in the way as an excuse, but really life gets in the way because we only have so much in that mental battery. So there are times where we focus on some things and don't focus on others. And I think the biggest thing for me that changed this quote unquote last time around in 2017 to now is I'm not as willing to give up on myself. I'm not as willing to ignore the excuses and the things that I'm allowing to come back in, I'm conscious of things. I'm mindful. I understand my behavior. I know, and the thing that I always say to people that I think is really challenging about that is once you get to that place of mindfulness and learning more about yourself and your behavior and your habits and the things you're doing and the things you're not doing, and you can be brutally honest with yourself, and you still do some of those behaviors, it's almost like it hurts more. Like living in that place of ignorance is almost like a gift to yourself. Like willful ignorance is a gift. Like, no, this isn't that. I'm not that bad. This isn't that bad.
It's blissful, Mike.
Right? Like, oh, I can fit into that space, kind of, and I'll find a chair that fits. And yeah, the seatbelt on the car is starting to be a problem, but I'll adjust the seat a little bit. Like, I can get a free ticket on, a second seat on a plane. I can do, these things are all fine. Navigating this is fine. When you're in that place of mindfulness around it, it's almost like an added weight of I'm doing things that I know I shouldn't be doing. So now I got to work on like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I allowing that pattern to continue? And sometimes we don't get the answers to those questions. Sometimes we do. And the work to handle what those answers are can feel insurmountable. So it's like you're at the bottom of the hill again. So in a lot of ways, like for my own personal journey, I feel like there's been a lot of peaks and a lot of mountains that I've climbed. But what I've learned along the way is that there's always going to be another mountain. There's
Mhm.
always going to be something else. And at the core of them all, every climb is about, seeing myself as valuable enough to do the work. Valuing myself as much as I value the other people in my life. Valuing myself as much as I do the people that come on my podcast. Valuing myself as much as the people that reach out to me in situations of desperation or need or fear in my DMs. Like getting to that place has been probably the biggest game changer for me because because you still have those days that you don't want to do the things you need to do. Like, and I'm not a parent, so I don't I say a lot of times that this is about self-parenting, but I can't say I'm a parent. I've helped take care of children before, but never been in direct responsibility caring for a child's well-being. But I'm responsible for my well-being, and blowing off my well-being or letting my tantrums take control, is something that I had to realize I there are going to be times that I allow that, and there are going to be times that I have to fight back against that. And there are going to be times where there's smooth sailing, and there's going to be days that are really hard. One of the conversations I've had with several clients lately that I keep coming back to because it was like you have those moments where you're talking to someone and you're helping someone through their challenges, and you have that aha moment, like whether it's something for yourself or big picture, like I need to remember this. Like this is important not just for this person I'm talking to, but this is important for every person I talk to, or for me, lessons I take in for myself. And that's realizing like there's that cliche out there, like losing weight is hard, being 200 pounds overweight is hard, choose your hard. We love memes with like angry muscle guys lifting weights and like saying hard things, and David Goggins yelling at us, and all of those situations, are, you know, Mark Bell running and yelling things at a camera, like all we love those things, but there's some reality in it. And the reality is that a lot of times when we choose the path of comfort, we're still choosing a path that's hard. We're just delaying the hard. Like choosing not to binge, choosing not to eat food that I know I can't manage, and I just have to be honest about my inability to manage. That can feel really hard sometimes. Like there can be days I'm sitting there like I just don't want to do this, or choosing to go into the gym. There are mornings that I drive to the gym and I sit in my car for 15 minutes to psych myself up to walk through that door. And I
Mhm.
know I'm going to feel great when I walk through that door, but it's still a hard decision to get out of the car and walk through that door. That upfront hard tends to be the hard that we avoid because there's this path of comfort. There's the giving in with food. There's the giving in with being lazy instead of moving ourselves. There's the giving in with being sedentary. But then there's the hard that comes after you take those actions. Like one of the things that one of my big challenges with food in a lot of ways was using food to push away other things that I needed to be dealing with, or whether that's emotions, a lot of us, deal with food, use food as a coping mechanism, whether it's for past trauma or current trauma or wherever it is. Like we build these well-worn grooves in our mind of this is the path that's going to help me feel better right now. But that feeling better is so instantaneous. And then after that comes whether it's we want to acknowledge guilt. We want to acknowledge, any of that, the emotional side of the after, the heart, which is hard to get through, or just the fact that because I went with the path of least resistance, now I have to make up time. I've X, Y, and Z has happened physically to me because of the choices I've made. So now I have to do the work again. And then we beat ourselves up. Like, I've done this before. Why am I doing this again? Can I even do this? Am I really able to do this? Like, you can fall into those mental traps. And for me, and again, like I said, I ramble as much as you ramble. Like, what I'm coming back to is like this idea of having to choose when we want to face the hard is just really important. Like, do I want today? I know today is going to be hard because right now I'm just planning to eat whatever I want and not pay attention to how much I'm eating and not weighing and measuring anything or not paying attention to nutrient profiles or any of that. That feels too exhausting to do today. But I know if I do that today, it might not stop tomorrow. It may, how many times in my life has like, I'm just going to have this one meal become a weekend, become a week, become a year. I have this long storied history of getting really great at losing. Like, I like to look at, you talked about that idea of fear versus kind of getting into a place of comfort. For me, often it was as soon as I went from wherever I was at to the high 300s, the comfort started setting in. And I started convincing myself that I didn't need to do that anymore. Or maybe I'm happy where I'm at, or like all of those things. Like, understanding that staying true and consistent to the actual purpose that I set out on is about sometimes having to say, I'm going to have to let today be really hard. I'm going to have to fight through tonight. I really just want to do this. Like, and this is the funny thing. Like, again, I'm going to stop saying the word tangent. I promise that as well. But you see so many people especially in the social space, you see so many coaches and influencers and fitness people that here's where I start to sound a little judgmental. So look, the audience can take this as they want to, but fitness influencers and coaches who are in their 20s who have never struggled with their weight, who then sit on their platform and tell you, if you don't have the cake at the birthday party, you're going to regret not having the cake at the birthday party. So just have the cake at the birthday party and then move on and you'll be completely satisfied. You can eat your favorite foods. You want to have Reese's peanut butter cups. You don't have to eat a full bag of Reese's peanut butter cups. Just have one and really savor it and make it special and enjoy it. And it's really going to be satisfying. And you don't know how satisfying it's really going to be. I have regular, I have Chips Ahoy cookies with my protein shake before I go to bed. I measure out one cookie on a plate and it is just smooth sailing for me. So you can do this. The reality is, for a lot of us, we can't do that because that one cookie, that one Reese's peanut butter cup, that piece of cake at a birthday party then leads to literally months or years of binging, regain of weight, new gain of weight, beating ourselves up, all of those things. And this isn't me going on a rant about saying just to remove foods from your life. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is you have to be honest about where you're at and what those choices need to mean for you, and like what choosing your heart in that moment can mean. And sometimes for me, that means saying no to something that I might really enjoy or I might really look forward to, because I know I'm then not setting myself up for things to get even harder. Like, I'm acknowledging that right now, this feels like the hardest decision I have to make. But if I make this one decision, I might feel better tomorrow. And I might not miss that thing as much as I miss it right now in this moment. It's acknowledging that our feelings change. And sometimes it is about saying no when other people might say yes. Like, it is about being able to hold ourselves to the standards we want to hold ourselves to for that day. I think specifically of a client that I'm working with right now who faces some similar challenges to what I did. And one of the things that and I'm not going to mention his name or details or anything in case he
Sure,
listens to this, but
of course.
one of the challenges that he faces is like, it's not about can he do things today? It's him thinking, well, can I really keep this weight off for the rest of my life? Can I actually do that? Because right now I don't believe that I can.
Mm,
And he keeps coming back to that. And one of the things that I work with him on is reminding himself that you don't have to worry about the future because you don't live in the future. You live today. And if you can get through today, you can fight again tomorrow, but you have to prove to yourself that you can get through today. Like, that can be dragging yourself, kicking and screaming through it. Like, and you said like you saw different points in my life where I white knuckled through things. I don't advocate white knuckling 7 days a week to anyone. If life feels like you're teetering on the edge 24/7, then what you're doing might not be the right path for you. But if there are times where you have to white knuckle through an evening, white knuckling through that desire to have some, and again, I'm not turning this into diagnosing the situation you're talking about, but using
No,
it as an
sure.
example.
Right, right.
If you having to sit there, or the other person out there who deals with this as well, or me when I would deal with this, has to say, okay, I just have to get through the next hour and then I'm going to be in bed. And I may lay in bed and still think about food. This is going to be hard. This is going to suck. There were nights that I cried. And again, I feel like not, I was privileged in that I wasn't responsible for the lives of other people and I wasn't a parent, because some of the things that I say, like I went through on my journey, like aren't relatable to someone. When I say there were nights that I went to bed at like 6 o'clock at night because I didn't feel like I could I would be able to manage controlling food for the rest of the night.
Right.
So I would go to bed at 6. But let's talk to you, you as a parent. If I were to say to you, be sitting here in a coaching session with you and I'm like, well, Russell, you're struggling with eating at night. Why don't you just, some of those nights that it's really hard, just go to bed early. And your immediate response to me could be, okay, that sounds really great, but that's just not realistic. That's not realistic for the life that I'm living. It's the same thing when someone says, every person should get up at 4 a.m. and do this. It's like, our time, we all literally have the same time, but we don't all literally have the same time. But for me, the reason I bring it up is I'm not bringing it up as a solution, but I'm saying there were nights that I cried myself to sleep early because all I wanted to do was eat. And I knew that I had to take that off the table as an answer, and I had to deal with the hard right then. And the amazing thing that I learned, because in that moment I thought, this is what I'm going to have to do every night for the rest of my life. Like, am I going to have to go to bed as soon as the sun starts to go down because I can't trust myself for the rest of the night? That wasn't what I needed to do. I needed to get through that night that felt like that was going to be the rest of my life. And then I had to acknowledge from that place of mindfulness, wow, last night was really freaking hard. Like, I was crying, I was pounding the pillow with my fists. Like, last night was really difficult, but I didn't give in. So that doesn't mean that every day is going to go the same way for me, but I do have now that lesson in my bank that I did that. I was able to do that one time. So maybe I can try to do that again and see what happens, and allow it to be this constant recycling of 24 hours where I make the choices that I need to make for myself and I take the actions that I need to make. And I choose to let it be hard on the days that it's going to be hard. I choose to be conscious of the things that I know are triggering for me. I wrote a blog a while back about situational triggers because, like, for me, it's being left alone for an extended period of time. So, like, even when I was like living on my own was a constant challenge, but living with other people, if I knew I was going to have a weekend alone or a week alone, that was when my brain immediately would go to, ooh, what are the things I can do this time when I'm alone? Because I don't have that added accountability of another person being like, are you going to a drive-through again today? Are you ordering another pizza? Like, what are you doing? Like, and so now I'm conscious of that, but that doesn't mean that right now in my life, even though I don't give in to that challenge anymore, that when I have that time, I live with my sister, she's going to go away for a week. I will still have that part of my brain that immediately is like, what are you going to eat this week? What's going to happen? And I have to discuss, work through that and go through that and acknowledge it as being a feeling, but also acknowledging that I don't have to act on it. And eventually, I think we get stronger when we face those hard things up front instead of allowing them to be dealing with the hard on the back end. Because I think we're great, especially as people that have struggled with our weight for a long time, at Monday morning quarterbacking the challenges that we faced. Like sitting down after we go through an episode, whether it's a binge episode or a week or a couple of days or whatever it is, like saying, you know what? If I had done this before that happened, I might not have found myself in that situation. So next time I'm going to do that. And then we can conveniently forget what we laid up for ourselves as the answers. But I think it then becomes we're great at assessing afterwards instead of having that assessment drive us forward. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm rambling there. Like
No, it
that.
makes a lot of sense. I wonder Yeah, that's mostly exactly what I do. That's mostly exactly what I've done. How do I fix this for tomorrow? How do I how do I not repeat what I did yesterday today and all that sort of stuff. But you still find yourself falling into the same patterns.
I think one of the biggest things that people get into is like, I need to build all these new habits. I think they miss the fact that they need to tie those new habits into the habits that they're trying to break.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm using food to avoid the world, and this, excuse me,
Hmm.
this is the thing that's not going to sound very motivational author speaky, but if I'm still going to choose to avoid the world, how do I avoid the world in a way that is more healthy for myself? Is there, and you're often going to find that there's not a way to do that, like,
Hmm.
or you can't find a clean way to do that, and you realize you have to face some things that you don't want to face.
Hmm.
But in the moment, if turning to food is serving something for me, what can I do? Like, a lot of times, when I get into those really deep discussions with someone about like what in that moment was going on, that food seemed like the only answer. And they talk about overwhelming work stress or situations, cyclical situations in other areas of our lives that we're having trouble breaking out of. I've worked with several different teachers that deal with, ebbs and flows of the year where they deal with frustrations with students. And like, it gets to like, I'm like, is this a new thing, or is this a pattern that's happened every year for the past 25 years of your career? And so you deal with challenges around this time every year. So if you've always dealt with those challenges with food and food's not an option, what is going to be the option to help you deal with that? And sometimes, especially sometimes when you hear people like myself or other people say you got to answer these questions, there's an implication that you have to answer those questions immediately. But I think the key becomes saying, okay, maybe I've done some of those things before and I felt like they didn't work. So is there something different I can try?
Let me jump in a little bit because I
Yeah.
do I do understand what you're saying with that, and I think maybe for better or for worse. I mean, a lifetime of regrets will not go away in 2 weeks, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I can't necessarily at 7:30 at night when I'm stressed out about my kid that's mad at me again for
Mm-hmm.
stuff that I don't really. I am uncertain if I really had a large part to do or to not do with it. But
Mm-hmm.
I do go to, well, what should I have instead? I don't know if that solves any root issues or not, but that is the whole idea. I think you were saying earlier is what everybody does is everybody sort of after actions, Monday morning quarterbacks it and decides to make a new plan or and what to go wrong. That's sort of what I have been doing. That's sort of what I do. Sometimes I get sort of lost in the weeds of it all. Sometimes, there's a big thing I've learned recently is if I'm feeling stressed and I have hunger issues and blah blah blah. Anyone that listens to me talk has heard me say this, 100 times. I've been meal prepping and just cooking, as I have referenced earlier. I have some ground beef pre-portioned. I just got done cooking 3 pounds of ground beef and I strained it and all that. It's sitting on my stove right now, waiting for me to put it into, portion out the meal prepping and stuff like that. So that's sort of where I go. I don't necessarily know. It's the answer has never really been just sit down and sit with my emotions. I guess I
Mm-hmm.
try to cover them with something and I just try to cover them, with better
Well, that was
food.
that was going to be my question, is if food isn't the answer, swapping in better food may be doing nothing to help in
Mm,
the end.
hmm.
Like, and I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying I'm diagnosing I'm not saying anyone that can diagnose them, but I'm not saying it's directly to your situation.
No, hey,
But
first of all,
I think sometimes we swap, like, yeah,
no, I
we
was
go
just
to
gonna
that.
say, no, I'll just jump in real
Yeah.
quick. There's no way this is a unique experience that I'm having.
Mhm. Oh, not at
So
all.
there's a lot of people that are listening to
Right.
this that don't experience this, but there are a lot of people that are listening to this that can relate. I believe so. There's no way this is a unique experience. So I think it's what if I'm the sort of the pincushion for
Hmm.
these expressions. I mean, so be it. I mean, I think these are conversations that people need to hear about it. So please
Yeah.
just preface that. Let's just say
Yeah.
I don't mind being the I don't mind being the guinea pig for today's.
Hmm.
I mean, I came to you and said, "Hey, I've been eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 3 nights in a row, and I haven't even told anybody about it yet." And it seems silly. Like I don't even understand why I'm eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches right now. It just makes no common sense. But and so it's leading to the conversation that we're having.
And And I think that right there you hit on something that's important, and that's that it there might not be common sense involved with why you're doing it. Like it may be something that is a reaction to something, like you said, whether it's stress throughout the day or situations throughout the day or whatever it is. But I think that the challenging question, or framing of the situation can become, if the problem is nighttime eating, then the solution isn't going to just be a better form of nighttime eating. That Because if doing it, or may not be, I'm trying to coach my language well, like it may not be the solution to just swap something better in, because it's allowing the habit of that using food for that response to continue regardless of what that food is. And
Mm.
it's the same way, like when someone says, and I see this, I've gotten DMs about this before, like, I really felt like I was going to binge on cookies the other day. So instead, I went to the Wendy's drive-through and I got two baconators without buns, so I made a better choice for myself than giving in and having those cookies. And you want to be able to then say to the person, though, you can binge on food that isn't sweets. You can binge on food that isn't hyperpalatable sweets and fats together. Like, to me, binging or in food choices also comes back to, like, why am I having the food at that time? Like, what is this? Why am I making this choice? And there are times where we make better choices, and that's the nuance to it, is like making better choices 99.9% of the time is going to be a better thing. Like in the end, just even from a health perspective, even if we're still using food as a coping mechanism, better food choices is going to provide better nutritional value to the body. Like there's the emotional side of it and the physical side of it. But if the desire is to want to break the pattern of having to turn to food in those situations, it's identifying what the actual situation is, and is there something I can do to manage this situation better and give myself what I'm getting from turning to food. Like it's that question cliche that you see a lot of the times, like when someone says, you see coaching people in the coaching sphere, cliche at least a lot, like, were you really hungry or was it an emotional hunger? And how do I figure that out? The great example is always, well, would you have sat down and eaten a boiled unseasoned chicken breast?
Hmm.
And if you would have sat down and eaten a boiled unseasoned chicken breast, you might have actually been hungry.
Totally good thing to say though, by the way. I mean, this is what I've been saying. Is it hunger or is it appetite? All right,
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
this, and that sort of has to be, I think, an ongoing dialogue within ourselves for anyone that's, a little bit of a food addict or food junkie,
Yeah.
right? Is this hunger or is this appetite? So I, with this emotional, would I eat the ground beef? Am I
Right.
real? And as you say, there doesn't necessarily even have to be a food eaten or not, but I guess I'm
Yeah.
acknowledging, I understand what you're saying. I've termed that, what you were just referencing, I've termed that as appetite, I
Yeah,
suppose.
and I've heard you say, I actually heard you say that in one of your recent podcasts I was listening to, and I thought that's a really, smart way to look at it. Like, and if it is just appetite, if it is not an actual hunger, something that your body needs, is giving your body food at that time the best thing that your body needs? Like,
Mm,
is
yeah.
that what is really going to serve the situation?
Is my
And
stomach actually sending hunger signals,
right,
or am
like
I just
is
trying to appease appetite with something less damaging?
am
I
I
really get what you're saying, dude. I really do get what
Yeah,
you're
and I
saying.
so then we have to then work on like what in those moments, and this is the really hard thing too, is like it's not just one answer. It's not that I always eat food in response to X. It's I eat food to respond to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, the whole alphabet through 14 times. So
Hmm.
that may mean that there are different times where we have to learn individual lessons that will help us with a very specific situation and learn different lessons that'll help us with a different situation. But the overall arc of it is being willing to ask those questions and be honest with ourselves. Like, why am I looking at, why is food what I turn to in this situation? For me, and this is something you've probably heard me talk about, like one of the biggest changes for me too, philosophically, was getting to that place of really looking at things from a stoic perspective. And the idea of what can I control in the situation and what can I control? And I need to let go of the things that I can't control.
Mm.
Letting go of the things that you can't control is not easy. Like it's said often as like, well, just let go of it. Because one of the biggest things I feel like I personally and a lot of people that I've worked with have had to let go of is the past mistakes that I've made, even past
Hmm.
mistakes I've made the day before.
Right.
Our propensity to build up regret and beating ourselves up from things that we've done in the past or past failures is one of the biggest things in the world that keeps us from moving forward. So it's learning sometimes to make peace with those things and acknowledge that the most important choice I make is always going to be the next one, and what should influence that choice can just be a huge part of the overall healing process. But it's something that sometimes, like a lot of like learning new skills, it takes structured repetition. It takes that discipline. But it takes like, for me, one of the biggest things that helped me with those things was when I get into the 5 minute journal. I don't know if you've ever heard of the 5 minute journal, but it's a journaling tool. It's a specifically branded journaling tool where it's a set of questions that you ask yourself in the morning, a set of questions that you ask yourself in the evening, and you do the same thing every day. And those questions are things along the lines of, like, in the morning, you're asking yourself, what are things that you're grateful for? What are 3 things that'll make today a really good day? Things along those lines. And in the evening, you're asking yourself questions like, what are 3 things that I accomplished today? What are 3 things I need to focus on doing differently tomorrow? And because I always had these dreams in my life of being this like incredibly creative, wonderful journaler. Like I would buy blank journals and new pens, and I would be like, this is the day I'm gonna write the great American novel. You know, the story of my life begins on this page, and I've written the date, and I'm perfect. And if for anyone out there that knows what bullet journaling is, I convinced myself I was going to get into bullet journaling for a while, but I would never actually use the tool. I never could find a way to just self motivate to journal. And the 5 minute journal gave prompts, and I found that with prompts, I was willing to do it every day, and I was learning things from it, and I was getting into that cycle. And I feel like it's one of those things that I continue to encourage people to learn and do for themselves, is because sometimes we talk about these things that, well, I need to think more about that, or I need to do more about that. It's, what are you specifically doing then to think more about that? So if I know, for me, why I'm eating, one of the biggest questions I always tell clients is like, every time you eat something, I want you to ask yourself why you're eating it. And that's going to feel weird some days, because sometimes the why is going to be, well, this is the meal that I planned and it fits in my program, and this is why I'm eating it, and I'm hungry, so I should eat something. But there are also going to be times when you ask that question and the answer is, I'm just really stressed out, or I had a crappy meeting at work, or my spouse has pissed me off, or the kids didn't want to go to bed tonight. You're not going to get used to asking yourself that question during the hard times if you're not constantly asking yourself that question.
Wow, good point, dude. Great
Like,
point.
the habits we want to build that help us during crisis times are the habits we need to be doing every day when things feel like sunshine and rainbows. Like, we need to be doing these things all of the time. So it is second nature, instead of Monday morning quarterbacking and saying, if I had stopped and asked myself why I was making that sandwich tonight, I might not have made that sandwich. But I didn't, because I didn't think about that until today when the sun is up and things feel clearer. But if every time I'm doing anything with food, I'm asking myself that question of, why am I eating this meal? Or, depending on the individual person, like, why is this the food that I'm eating right now? How do I feel about this? One of the things that and I don't know if you can relate to this, but that I struggled with, and a lot of people that I talk to struggle with, is regardless of what the meal is in front of them, it can be a perfectly balanced, healthy meal for their way of eating, from a keto perspective or carnivore perspective. It's this gorgeous ribeye steak, perfectly seared, brown crust, everything is perfect. And it's a giant steak. And I finish that steak, and then I immediately feel like I want to eat the world. Like, it doesn't matter that I just took in 1,200 calories of protein and healthy fat and satiating beef and all of these things. I then immediately am thinking, I want cookies. I want Reese's peanut butter cups. I want to make another steak. I really feel like I should have had this with this, or why didn't I have potatoes? Like, lighting that fuse at the end of a meal, was a big thing. And I honestly, I don't struggle with it as much now. Like I used to. I used to struggle with it daily. Like every time I ate, I dealt with it. I wrote a blog about it once. I called "Lighting the Fuse," because I saw every time I put any food into my mouth, like I was lighting the fuse on a bomb. And if
Mm.
I didn't find a way to diffuse that bomb was going to explode, and I was going to lose the rest of that day when it came to food. Like, having to get myself to that place of realizing, though, I also called it a fuse because a fuse is short. If I could get myself through that place of acknowledging that every time I had a meal that I was going to still feel hungry after I ate, regardless of how much it was, in 10 to 15 minutes, I wasn't going to be feeling that same way. So I needed to then physically, and this is where I talk about turning these great thoughts of things we need to do into actions. I would set a 15-minute timer and choose from a list of things that I had already prepared, of things that I was going to do after I ate. So whether that was a chore, whether that was something for work, whether it was going for a walk, it's why I love the push that you see it from a lot of people that well, of the 10-minute walk after eating. Like, because it's not just about digestion and all of those things. It's also about shifting your focus from food.
Oh
Like,
wow,
what do
that
I need
I
to
don't
do?
even. That's really well said, dude. I'm sorry, I'm stepping on you, but
Yeah, no, it's
that's.
okay.
I don't even know if I've even heard that shift of focus part of
And
it brought up
it,
before.
and honestly, that's what if you were to go into the app, I use Slack for communicating with my clients. If you were to pull it up right now and look at all of my clients, 9 times out of 10, scrolling back sometime within the past 72 hours, you're going to see me saying to someone, okay, but what are you going to do to shift your focus from food right now?
Hmm.
Like, what right now, food feels like the only answer. You're not going to let food be the answer. So what are you going to do to shift your focus? What are you going to do anyway? And again, it goes back to this idea of working on these questions and asking them when we feel good. I don't think you come up with your crisis response list when you're in crisis. I think on a day that things are feeling really good, you
Hmm.
sit down and say, okay, I want to keep a list on my phone of 10 things I can do besides eat.
Hmm.
And that list should be organic and grow and change, you know, getting to the junk drawer in the kitchen, organizing a closet. I need to get the recycling taken out. I need to do this. I need to do that. I want to do this. There's a new book I want to listen to. I want to listen to the newest episode of Russell's podcast. Like, this is a list of things, I got to throw the plug out there. This is a list of things that I'm going to choose to do besides eat when I feel like I want to turn to food for something. So instead of having to reinvent that wheel every time, it's okay, I need to stop myself and redirect my focus. So, and what I've even worked on with some people that dealt with this really intensely was, before they even start their meal, is what am I doing as soon as I'm done eating? Like, what comes next? Like, so I'm going to have this meal, I'm going to put the plate in the sink, and then I'm going to go take a 10-minute walk and listen to a podcast during that time. I'm going to sit down and journal about how my day went. I'm going to go into the bathroom and I'm going to get those weird white spots that form in the sink, no matter what you do to the sink. I'm going to wipe my sink down. I'm going to handle, I don't know, whatever that list looks like for the person. I could go on generating
Hmm.
stupid examples, but getting to that place of having that plan, but
Can I
also
interrupt you
having,
for a second?
yeah,
Can I
go
interrupt you?
ahead.
You haven't said anything vicey, by the way, yet. You haven't said have a cigar, have a
Mm-hmm.
drink, jerk off, get high. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Like, I'm it's an adult podcast.
Right.
Nothing you've said is very vicey. Do you feel like, where do you place vices? I mean, I know you're I'm probably just interrupting a really
No,
good
it's okay.
layout here right now, but I observationally and in question, like, where do you rank, where do you rank? I mean, going for a walk seems like a great idea. Brushing your
Mm-hmm.
teeth right afterwards seems like a great idea. I mean, journaling seems like a great idea. Do you rank having a cigar? Do you rank, having a drink, or is it just one vice leads,
Mm-hmm.
risking one vice, having a problem with one vice, risking becoming then having a problem with two vices? Do you just feel it's too risky, or that? Because I could easily say I could maybe have a drink or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or
Well,
I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
I feel I'm almost embarrassed even asking that question, but I
No.
mean, I imagine a lot of people do just have efforted or
Mm-hmm.
considered just swapping vices at some sort of something less harmful or something like that. What do you think about that?
Well, I have a few thoughts. I'm like, one, I think if it's transfer addiction, then that's a problem.
Right.
Like, especially if it's something that's going to lead to, detrimental effects on our health that we don't want to have brought on.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not going to tell someone to go chain smoke instead of have a meal, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, it feels
I'm
ridiculous
someone,
even as I
but
ask
I'm
it, but
someone that
it's something
I
popped up.
enjoy a cigar occasionally, like, and
Hmm.
sometimes regularly, like, not regularly, where I'm like, I'm gonna end this podcast recording and go outside and have a cigar. But
And
for
I feel
me,
like I didn't do my
but
job, but
for
okay,
me,
whatever.
for me, the experience of a cigar, and again, now this is just going to sound like a cigar podcast.
Uh,
Um, it's not the same thing as why I want food. Like, it's not filling that need. If
mm,
I felt like it felt that need, I might consider something along those lines. But I don't think it's in it, because, like we talked about, I'm talking about fulfilling the need from a place that drives me forward from a health place.
yeah.
And so, like, I look at, like, alcohol. There are a lot of people that drink alcohol and can manage alcohol. Like, I'm not speaking to someone that has an actual problem with alcohol. But for me, the problem with alcohol wasn't that I drank too much and got drunk or things along those lines. But I'm coming up on, let me do the math, 7 years without really drinking. I've had one beer during that time.
Hmm.
Um, because for me, when I drink alcohol, I make bad choices with food. Like
Hmm.
a couple of drinks, and whether I'm going, whether I'm trying to order a pizza, or because the last night that I actually drank, and it was a holiday party for the company I was working at the time. President of the company was notorious. Like he wants to have a moment over a drink with every person at the party throughout the night. Like it's just his thing. Like, and so I was full on, had been gone through my hospitalization and had been keto for almost 2 years at this point. And, he knew me. So he was very much like, he's like, so you're going to have a couple drinks at the party. You haven't drank at a couple of our social events. He's like, but it's the Christmas party and we pay a lot of money for the party. And, we
Weird
can
the
have
way
a
people
vodka
advocate for
soda.
that. That's
Yeah, it is really,
crazy.
that's a whole nother discussion.
Whole
But
nother discussion.
I was like, yeah, no, I'm like, no, I was planning to have a couple drinks. I had two vodka sodas and I was on the floor because at that point it had been a long time since I had a drink. But
Yeah.
I had prepared my house because I knew when I got drunk, I would go home and try to eat everything that I could get my hands on.
Hmm.
So I had actually prepared my house so that there was no prepped food and there was no keto snacks or treats or anything along those lines, in the house. At 2:30 in the morning, I was defrosting a steak under hot water in the sink to cook a steak when I went home that night. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Like when I drink, I'm not getting anything out of it. I don't really enjoy the taste of most alcohols. Why am I setting myself up for like scrounging to a freezer at 3 o'clock in the morning to try to defrost some meat to make something to eat? Like I acknowledge I make bad food choices when I drink, so I don't drink. um I had a beer with a friend before I moved to California because he's like, if I come to Rhode Island, we're going to the cigar bar where you used to drink Guinness, and we're going to have a cigar and a Guinness. And I was like, okay, I'll have a Guinness with you. And it was fine. Um, but I think as far as like vicey things, like, I think again, it goes back to what is the purpose of the thing you're using to fill the space? Like the things that I gave you were all productive things because we also feel really good when we do things that are productive. Like checking something off a to-do list that's been on the to-do list for a couple of years feels really good. So not only am I making a choice to make a healthier choice for myself in that situation, I'm getting the added bonus of getting something done. I'm getting this greater place of reinforcement. Like it doesn't mean that everything has to be perfectly, not everyone's list is going to be perfect. Not everyone's thing is going to like it has to be what works for you. But I think like from that vice place, like, and I've talked to clients about sometimes that 10 minutes is doing something stupid, like playing a video, and again, there's going to be a lot of adults who are like, video games are not stupid. But let's be honest, like sitting down and playing a video game is not always the best use of our time from a productivity standpoint. So sometimes we beat ourselves up for doing it. But if playing a video game for 15 minutes after a meal shifts my focus from food, then let it be that. If going outside and sitting in the is the I don't know what time of the day. I'm old. I eat dinner early, so the sun's still up. But if you're going outside to watch the sunset and you're gonna bring a drink with you, that's great. You're gonna have a cigar, that's great. But if it becomes I switch it from I'm gonna keep eating to now I have to do this other thing, and if I don't do this other thing, I'm gonna freak out, then that I think is just transferring the problem. It's like the swap of food in the situation where food shouldn't be the answer in the first place. Like I think it, and maybe that's I don't know, maybe that's a sanitized nice answer, but because I think the same thing then with vices could be, should I take a pill? Should I take an edible? Like, I mean, I could go down a rabbit hole of the number of times that I've had clients that tell me that edibles have no impact on their weight loss progress, and every time they binge, it's after they take an edible. And I've had to
I've
had
had
that
to swear
awkward.
off edibles, dude. I've had to
I've
swear off
I've had to had
edibles.
that discussion
Yeah.
with someone where I'm like, you say that it's helping you with a lot of things, and it may be, 100%. I'm not like dogging people that use things for different reasons, but
Hmm.
in this situation, every time you've had a binge episode, it's been after taking an edible, and you haven't binged when you haven't.
Hmm.
Like, do we need to talk about that then? Like, do we maybe need to have an uncomfortable discussion? Like, I think it's knowing what's going to serve you, in those situations, and is going to feel like it actually distracts your focus. Because I think, again, a lot of times you hear people on podcasts like this or in social media posts say, here's 5 things to do instead of eating. But as an individual, those 5 things really would have nothing to do with helping you shift your focus. It's what that individual person used to shift their focus. Like you have to find the things that actually allow you to say, right now, I'm not thinking about food. Like, because sometimes we say, I'll go for a 10-minute walk. And that 10-minute walk is thinking about what our next meal is going to be. And if continuing to focus on food during that 10-minute walk isn't working, then maybe 10-minute walk isn't the answer for you to help you shift your focus. Maybe it's something that actually it needs to be something that actually engages your brain. So a lot of times I'll, when people are like, well, I'll read a book, I'm like, you know, light fiction might not be the right answer. Something that's really detailed and intricate could be a better answer. Something that's about self-help and improvement could be a better answer because it engages your brain and allows you to actually feel like you're focusing on something besides allowing your thoughts to drift back to food.
Mm, really
But
insightful, pal.
well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I I mean I feel like I was just blessed, and anyone that was listening is blessed to kind of hear your thoughts on that. It's clearly well thought through. I'm curious a little bit about some of the details of your diet right now. I mean, and we talked about, I know paleo was part of your past and
Mm-hmm.
keto. Are you still practicing a keto diet?
Mm-hmm.
So
Keto. No, go ahead. I didn't
no,
want to cut your question off.
what? Well, do you have has your opinions on macros changed much over the last 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I would say, well, yeah, there's a can of worms for you. Because this is one of the things that sometimes gets me in trouble with other people in the keto space. Like when I first started keto, I was like 100% that person that was like, every human being on the planet needs to be on a ketogenic diet. Like the act of getting into ketosis is the only thing that's going to stop, cause world peace, stop the ships from sinking, like save us all from all of our problems and solve every issue. The carbs are the devil message. Like I was very much in that place. And I think that happens to a lot of us. We become zealous about things. Like people that, there are a lot of people, in specifically in like the really well-defined dietary communities, vegan, carnivore, keto, if it fits your macros, like they become 100% certain that their way is the only way and that there's something magic. And for me, because there are books like Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes and Jason Fung's work that very much was pushing this message of if you spike your insulin at all ever throughout the day, you're gaining fat. And so you just want to eat in a way that doesn't spike insulin. And then you start to realize that everything we eat has an effect on our insulin levels in our body. And it's more about, am I sustaining spikes and what's happening after and how low am I going after? Like all becomes way more nuanced. And you realize that, I'm very much a keto advocate because for me, eating a ketogenic lifestyle frees me from the physical cravings that I had for food, frees me from a lot of the food noise that I have, and allows me to maintain the caloric deficit I need to lose weight. Because at the end of the day, I do believe that regardless of how you get there and can sustain being there, that caloric deficit is what's going to end up taking weight off your body. And whether that's achieved through, food and your activity level and your intentional exercise and your NEAT, your non-exercise, whatever that acronym is, the shaking your legs when you're sitting at a desk, sort of shaking your head like you are right now, you're burning calories. But I think finding the way to the right path, is really where my philosophy is now. Like, is this something that is actually going to help someone? Like when someone comes to me and they say, I want to do keto, but I don't think I can give up bread. My response is, well, when you think it might be possible to give up bread, come back and talk to me about keto. But if you are convinced that it's not possible, you're not going to do it. You're not going to be able to sustain it. You might be able to do it for 30 days. You might have some great results. But if you're living with that constant thought in your head that I can't not have X, Y, or Z in my life, then this might not be what's right for you. Like, I do think for me, I have a carbohydrate threshold that if I eat over a certain threshold is when I start to feel lethargic. I start to feel cravings get stronger. I start to lose some of that mental clarity that I feel when I'm on a more structured ketogenic plan. The interesting thing for me is like, playing with protein and fat has become more interesting over the past couple of years. I think even than looking at carbs, like I know where for me keeping carbs at provides me, I'm eating fat and protein to satiation, to satiation levels, but the percentage of fat versus the percentage of protein can be something that's really interesting, to see how different people respond. For me, if I take my fat too low and my protein too high, it feels like I'm eating more carbs in terms of how I respond, whether that's from a psychological perspective or a biological perspective. and someone could, we could switch over to a Lane Norton discussion, and he's going to tell me that there's no difference and that the studies show that the ketogenic diet doesn't impact X, Y, or Z. Great. But I just know for me what it feels like in practice. I know for me what happens if I eat a certain way on a certain day. So I think my perspective on macros is like, I has changed in not in that I think like my ratios need to be different, anything from that technical side of things, but more from the perspective of I acknowledge that the ketogenic diet that I use for myself and I work with clients on all the time is a powerful tool that can help people get to the place they need to be when it comes to their relationship with food. Like for me, it allows like I know there are people out there that are like the ketogenic diet is too restrictive. And my response to that is every way of eating that promotes weight loss is restrictive. You're restricting something. And whether that's amounts or whether that's types of foods or whether that's, the specific preparation of foods, whatever that is, something is going to be restrictive. There is no, and I'll die on this hill, like, and you can refute me or anyone else could come out, respond to this and stitch it and refute me. Like, there is no way to get into a place of a caloric deficit without restricting. Deficit in and of itself is a restrictive word. Like, so whether that restriction comes from me eliminating all of those high carbon, high fat, palatable foods that used to dominate my life, or for another person, it's about portion controlling, you're restricting. Portion control is restriction. Like the biggest thing that pisses me off is, again, and I don't want to just sound like I'm a crotchety old man, like, but these very young influencer coaches who stand there and say, I'm going to teach you how to eat all of your favorite foods without restriction and still lose weight is the biggest hot steaming pile of garbage that I've ever heard in my life. And it pisses me off because it plays to that promise that overweight person out there who struggles to manage foods wants to hear. And so they're like, here's my money, take it and teach me this. And then the thing that they teach you is you just end up having to eat less of these foods and eating more of these other foods that are going to fill you up faster. And it's like, okay, so portion control that I've struggled with for 40 years is what you're telling me is your magic secret for controlling these foods and allowing me to. I don't think they have a perception of what eating without restriction looks like. Like, I honestly just don't think they do. Like, it's the same thing with you see a lot of dietitians say, if you have a problem with ice cream, what I want you to do is to fill your freezer with ice cream and allow yourself free access to ice cream. And eventually, what you're going to realize is you don't just want ice cream all the time. You want other foods that are healthier for your body and are going to make you feel better. So then ice cream doesn't take up such a big space in your life. And I'm going to tell you that I ran a 45-year experiment on doing that with Reese's peanut butter cups, and I ended up 540 pounds. There is not a point for me where unrestricted access starts to lessen. It doesn't happen. I have tried it for years on end. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen for other people. But for me, I had to be honest about that. I had to be honest about knowing that there are things that I can moderate and there are things that I can't moderate. And so for me, living in the keto space when it comes to my nutritional approach allows me that quote unquote restriction that people love to demonize gives me so much more freedom in my life that fuck it, I'll take restriction. It's completely fine. If I can't sit there and eat 2 pounds of mashed potatoes with my dinner, I'm not going to go to bed and cry about it. Like, and there probably were nights that I did, but I'm not going to sit there and cry about it today because I know if instead I'm planning to make mashed cauliflower tonight. Ooh, exciting. If I have a serving of mashed cauliflower with the beef I'm going to have tonight and I enjoy that and I wistfully think of mashed potatoes for a minute, that restriction is worth knowing how I'm going to be able to get up and move my body in the morning, how I'm going to be able to move through the world, the things that I can access. Because I honestly don't think that sometimes when people talk about a way of eating as being too restrictive, they understand what it's like to live in a body that is too restrictive.
You can't say it any better than that. When your body starts to become restrictive, that is, man, I don't think, and I guess we all deal with it to some degree, right? But when you actually start seeing the quality of your life genuinely limited because your ability to move or fit into common spaces starts to diminish, it's a sad place to be in. And I wonder how many of those people have dealt with it. I mean, I guess it's not super important, but I relate to what you're saying because I've noticed I've even heard people now, as I get onto social media, which I see, even if someone is trying to, maybe they're doing it a little clumsy, but even if they're trying to say, hey, listen, you have to start realizing that junk food is killing you. And
Mm-hmm.
then I see people push back against that. I'm like, no, maybe that isn't, maybe you're not the audience for that
Right.
reel.
Right.
And maybe you need to just have an awareness that you're not the audience for that reel, and maybe there's a significant portion of the listening members that that's not necessarily the audience for that message, but there is an audience for that message. I can't exist with Oreos in my house. I just can't. I'm starting to realize, like, and this, and it sounds so silly, and it's embarrassing, if I had to be really
Mm-hmm.
honest with you, but I don't seem to be able to exist with raisin bread in my
Mm-hmm.
house, because there's no such thing as a loaf of raisin bread in my house. It's that red piece of plastic over there that me and everybody else in my house are basically racing to make sure that they get
Mm-hmm.
their cut of that loaf and they don't get somehow squeezed out of the divvying. No one in my house seems to do well with raisin bread in the house. We all attack it when we don't think we're being watched. And so how can you tell me that we just need to just fill up the pantry with 20 loaves of raisin bread and that's going to be okay? There's no reason for me to ever pick that up off of the aisle and go, yeah, we'll just have this, unless I'm saying, well, it's a loaf of raisin bread. I know me, my wife, and my kids are all going to smash it, and it's going to be gone in 3 days. That seems like
Yeah.
that's not really a good health
Well,
decision, does it? I don't know.
well,
That doesn't qualify, I don't think.
yeah, I think one of the things that's really challenging about it is painting with the broad brushes is can be what some people need at different times. Like hearing those messages that it's okay. Like sometimes I'll say to people, like, a great way to start looking at food is to start looking at where there's added sugar in your diet and removing things that have added sugar in them. Like looking for that just as a big brick to move. And the reality is that then you'll see people who are like, well, added sugar isn't the demon. It's not the worst thing in the world. This is the worst thing in the world. And I'm like, I'm not demonizing it. I'm trying to help someone who doesn't have a great understanding of what's on their plate get a better understanding of what's on their plate, encouraging people to read ingredient labels and understand how they personally respond to different things. And sometimes people want something big that they can start moving so they start to feel like they're doing something. So you give people these broad strokes of brushes and say, now let's talk about, put this into place and then let's talk about how it can become more nuanced instead of starting with those finely tuned detailed nuances that most people don't even see as a way to sustain, as something to sustain or move forward with. Like understanding that message that we send out. Yes, and I very much am that person. Like I hate people that do those reels where they're walking through grocery stores and they pick something off the shelf and they say, this is killing your children,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to put you in the grave. It's like, no, it's not going to put you in the grave. And I was actually having a discussion with my coaching partner this morning. He's like, how do you feel about this ingredient? Like I've been seeing this pop up on some things. And I'm like, at the end of the day, if unless a person has a specific reaction to an ingredient, they're probably going to be fine. But if that ingredient is in something that they have trouble managing, then that becomes the problem. Like it's not like it's automatically killing all their gut bacteria overnight. And I don't believe, that's what's happening, or it's introducing parasites into their system. But if that ingredient allows them to maintain the deficit and the macros that they're trying to hit, then allow that ingredient to exist. Like, don't, it's, I think the tangent with it is like diet soda. Like, there are some people, like, one, I'll throw it out there. Like, I don't talk about, ooh, I'm getting a power alert. I'm sorry. I got to grab a plug for a second. Is that
Oh,
okay?
sure, 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 of
Okay.
course.
Hold on one second. Sorry about that.
Oh, don't worry.
I just didn't want me to just disappear and not
I
realize what was
appreciate
going
you.
on in your end.
You're a good man. You're a good man.
um, so what I'm talking about is like realizing that we sometimes get to this place of, people want to push back and say something is a certain way or shouldn't be that way, and like we have to have a more nuanced understanding that different people need different messages and need to hear different things, and some people do respond to things. There are people that I 100% know have lost a significant amount of weight just because they never knew about portion control and they never knew about looking at the makeup of their food and what was going into their food and making better food choices. Like they got to over 400 pounds through a lack of understanding of food. It just went with what they were taught, the portions they were taught. They live that life happy, and those are also usually the people I talk to that have never dieted before in their lives. Because if you're someone that started on diets as a kid, you have a great understanding of like nutritional labels and ingredients and how many points something is and all of that different stuff. Uh, so I think it's understanding who needs the message, and I think you put it in a well. Like you might not be the audience for that. Um, Real. It's why I also feel like one of the things that I struggle with as a coach is I'm definitely not the coach for every person. Like when someone comes to me and says, I want to lose 30 pounds in 30 days for a wedding. Can you help me with that? In theory, I could help them with that. Like, let's set you up with a plan. Let's set some goals. Let's set up what your daily actions are and a checklist, and you'll check in with me every day, and we'll go from there and we'll get you there. But that's going to allow zero space probably for them to work on their actual relationship with food that brought them to the place that they're trying to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. So from an ethical perspective, I say to that person, I don't want to set up a certain number in a certain day's goal with you, because my goal is for you to work on everything that's involved with this relationship with food that you have, and that you need to be able to not just lose 30 pounds in 30 days, go to the wedding and put it all back on in a week. I want you to keep that 30 pounds off. I want you
Mhm.
to learn how to maintain, because we're all great, and you can echo this as well. Like we can, in a lot of ways, people that are significantly overweight or just overweight in general are the best people in the world when it comes to weight loss. Like we know how to lose weight. Like we know the things we can do, the
Mhm.
things we can white knuckle through, the ways we can hammer that weight off. And I think I heard you talking about this in one of your podcasts over the past couple of months. Like, I know what I could do to lose weight. Like I could just hammer into this place and cut all these foods out and just do this and just focus in on that. And I could do that and I could lose weight. But am I going to maintain that weight loss? Like, is that going to be something that I can sustain for the rest of my life? And I also don't, you see a lot of people saying right now, if the things you're doing on day one of your diet aren't things that you can do for the rest of your life, then it's not the right diet for you. I don't know if I 100% believe that. Like, I
Right.
think there are different things that we do at different times. Like, if you are someone that is in a crisis with your weight, like to the point that you're being told by your doctor, get your affairs in order. There may be some more extreme things you need to do when starting that weight loss than you might need to do when you're down 200 or 300 pounds. Like that's, we learn different things. We learn what are the things that we can moderate, what are the things that we need to, stay away from, what are the things that we can handle. I've also helped people transition from a ketogenic diet to a different way of eating, because one of the biggest problems I think people have when they use a ketogenic diet for weight loss is they don't know how to end a ketogenic diet. Like they go right from I'm eating 25 grams of carbs a day to that I've got 3 bags of sun-made raisin bread sitting on the counter, and I'm going right back to that.
Mhm.
Like there is a difference between giving your body, because of all those things that come into play with keto, like your body isn't holding as much water to process carbohydrates. So if you're going to raise your carbohydrate level, you need to think about, how do I raise that up in a measured way so that my body responds to it better? Like, how
Mm.
do I move myself into that place and keep that going? And I don't, my battery is not okay. I hope it is. Oh, sorry, I'm making sure that you don't lose me.
If I
Hopefully,
lose you, it
my
just
fingers are
gets
crossed.
okay.
Fingers crossed. I'm using a different charger than normal because it's the one that I had right here. But
No problem, pal.
anyway, like the idea, now I feel bad that you're gonna have to deal with this in the middle of your podcast. That's
Not
my
at all,
challenge to you.
dude. Not at all.
Um, so I want people to, understand that you may need to do different things at different points in your journey, but it is possible to transition into different areas. It is
Mhm.
possible. But here's the thing: is like when on day one of a diet, we say all I want to do is get to a certain point, and then I want to go back to eating the way I was before. That is the lunacy. Because if eating the way you were eating before and eating those foods the way you were eating before brought you to that place that you were in that you needed to make a change, how are they going to keep you away from going back there? They're not.
Mhm.
So I think the biggest thing that I try to encourage my clients, whether I'm working with someone on a ketogenic diet, whether someone's using a paleo approach, whether I'm working with someone who's just tracking calories using different tools, is when it is time for you to think about maintaining your weight loss, I want you to think about how you felt while you were losing weight. And if you felt energized and fantastic and life was never better when you were eating certain foods, why are you going to give up those foods and step away from that? Like that part of us that wants to step away from it, I think usually is the sign of someone who is dealing with the food addiction issues and those things. And they just can't wait to get back to their fix. I did the thing I needed to do, and now I can go back to doing what I was doing before. So it's being honest with yourself about those things that I think is really important.
I know food is sort of what dug us into the graves that we were climbing
Mm-hmm.
into every day of our lives. But how has exercising been affecting you since you've started your weight loss in
Well,
this most recent turnaround? And when did you start becoming really conscious of exercise into it? I know keto was your first
yeah.
focus, but when did
Mhm.
exercise start becoming part of it for you also?
Well, I would say right now for the past week and a half, it's not been a great focus because I injured my back. So I'm now back to a place where I feel like I can actually go back to the gym. So that's good, instead of just doing some stretching in the morning, which is what I've been doing, stretching and walking. For me, I see exercise as something, and I saw this very early on, but it was what I was capable of or not, is exercise and eating go hand in hand. In that when I move my body better, I want to fuel my body better to keep moving and when I am eating the way that I want, to feel good, I want to see that in action. Like I see them having a reciprocal relationship. I may not be saying that really great. When I started exercising, it was walking from the front steps of my house to a telephone pole and back. And it took me 5 minutes to walk less than half a block. And that's all I could do. It's all I could manage. I would have to sit on those steps for 20 minutes after, and then walk up the steps to my apartment and sit for another 20 minutes in my apartment. So I was doing an hour of exercise when really I was only active for 5 minutes, but the recovery time. Um, but I realized that meeting myself where I was at and doing things consistently was what was really important. So I allowed that to grow. I started doing that more and more. And eventually that turned into getting back into the gym, which I had done years before and enjoyed, weightlifting. And for me right now, then that is the thing, is like I prefer to do most of my walking outside of the gym. I like to kind of be outside and seeing different things. The treadmill just destroys my brain. On a rainy day I may do it, but mentally we don't have a great relationship. Um, Lifting is something that I just really enjoy. Like I would by no means say I'm an expert and I'm throwing anything around that's impressive. I'm a 51-year-old man, with a low percentage of muscle on my body probably. Um, but I really get into, I use the Fitbot app. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. The Fitbot app allows you to set what your goals are and how often you want to work out and what equipment you have access to, and it generates workouts
Oh, that's
and
cool.
gives
That's
and
really
it
cool.
gives you videos of the exercises so you can learn technique and like, allows you to track things. And I'm not sponsored by them or anything along those lines. I'm not
It
bringing it
should
up
be.
from a sale place. But if anyone does reach out to me, I think I can get you like 7 or 8 free workouts with it. It's something every person who uses the Fitbot app can do for another person. Um, but I like it because if I'm not in the mood to do a certain thing, it suggests I can swap other exercises in, or if I want to change up, I go, like right now I've been doing push pull legs just because I haven't done that in a while. So that's kind of the focus. I'm not one of those people that like I have to do a certain style of working out for the rest of my life. It's like, what do I enjoy doing? We're coming back. The weather will hopefully finally be support going into the pool here at the complex that I live in. So I can get back to using the pool for cardio because I
Pool's
love,
awesome, dude.
love that.
Pool's
Like I
awesome.
miss it. We were told when we moved in that the pool was heated. The pool is not heated.
They're
So it's been a
liars.
few, it's been a few months since we've been able to use it, but we're getting close. So I'm looking forward to getting a pool back into things and, just for me, being intentionally active now has just become habit in my life. Like it's not something that I feel like I have to. Are there days that I don't want to do it? Of course, but I think that's like with all habits. Like there are some days that you don't want to do things, but you choose to do it anyway. Same thing with
Yeah.
food. There are
Hey,
days that you don't want to do it anyway.
I have to step on your point here just a little bit. Anybody that can hear my voice, use the pool to do those body weight exercises you otherwise would
Mm.
not be able to do. It's so liberating to be able
Oh
to go,
yeah.
oh wow, I can do lunges when I'm in 2.5 feet of water. And sure,
Mm-hmm.
you look a little goofy doing lunges in 2.5 feet of water, but it's not like people can't tell you're already heavy or not. And you're already there. And whether people realize or not, anytime you see someone getting after it, no matter what their body shape is, you just respect that they're getting after it. So people are smart enough to go, oh wow, he's lunging in the pool. It's been cool. I really feel like I have gained more strength in my legs in the last couple
Mm-hmm.
months learning how to use the pool to do some body weight exercises than I ever did climbing in and out of that leg press machine or leg
Mm-hmm.
extension or curl machine. I please, 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 anybody that's in earshot of this voice that is struggling to do some things like lunges and stuff like that, find a pool, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it. And message me if anyone wants to. I wanted to hit one more thing before you go, though.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've been coaching now. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of like your coaching journey and where you're at
Sure.
now and how people could find you if they were interested in utilizing your services with coaching?
Definitely. So I, in 2018, hired a coach for the first time for myself. And it was something I never thought I would do, but I was just at a place where I felt stuck and didn't want to give up on myself. And I was like, I need someone to help me figure out how I move forward. And so I hired a coach. His name's Jonathan Shane. People know him on Instagram as the Keto Road. And he was starting coaching and he was like, do you want to be we were friends. And he's like, do you want to be my first client? And I had this thought in my head, like, he hasn't coached anyone else. I'm going to be able to bullshit him. Like,
Huh.
honestly, that was a thought. Like,
Wow.
I'm going to be able to manipulate him as much as he thinks he's going to manipulate me.
That's funny.
That's fantastic. But I worked with him and it was a great tool, and I discovered kind of a lot about myself working with him. And soon after we ended our working relationship, him as coach, me as client. It was New Year's Eve 2019 into the start of 2020. And I wanted it to be this big dramatic thing where I fired him at midnight in 2019. So I set that up and he knew in advance that was when we were ending things. But soon after that, he was planning to kind of go out on his own. And he's like, I really think you have a knack for talking to people and, helping people. I'd love to work with you as a coach. So I kind of studied under him for a while. And then we did some group coaching. And then I started one-on-one coaching later that year. And now I work, I have an accountability group on Facebook with him that we do some group coaching in, but also I work one-on-one with clients and I work with people that are working on weight loss. I also have some programs that are involved with just working with people on mindset and accountability. So that can be whether someone's looking for a person to help them set up a nutritional plan that fits them personally. I work with a lot of people on ketogenic diets, but I work with people on paleo plans. But I also work with people who come to me and say, I'm having trouble staying, I love Weight Watchers, but I'm having really trouble working on my accountability with it. Can we work together? And so I work with those people on their mindset and accountability, regardless of their way of eating. But my programs range from monthly check-in, a program where it's just a monthly check-in and we set up goals and we come back together at the end of the month. But I also work with clients, like I've been getting messages throughout this whole conversation from clients that I message with on a daily basis, and we have weekly phone calls to kind of support what they're doing and what they're going through. The clientele that I work with, I tend to have people that gravitate to me who have seen the experience that I've gone through and are looking to replicate something similar for themselves. Not necessarily the amount of weight that I've lost, but working on that relationship with food. So I do a lot of work with people on helping them kind of heal that relationship with food and build those structures and habits that they need to move themselves forward. The greatest thing as a coach is always, someone coming to the end of that relationship and feeling like they're ready to go on their own.
Mm.
And so I think any coach you work with should be someone who's getting you ready to do that, regardless of, I have some clients that I've worked with for several years and some that I work with for a month. Like, it depends on what that person's needs are. But I wholeheartely believe it is about finding out what's going to work nutritionally for you. Like, I also think there isn't just one way to keto. Like, I don't plug things into a calculator for people and just say, here's an answer. Here's a printed meal plan. I don't do a lot of like meal plans. I'll help people figure out a meal plan, but I really feel like my work is about empowering people to make choices around food that are going to drive them forward and meet the goals that they're working on. So I
Mm.
work a lot on educating and allowing people to take risks when it comes to like actually planning things for themselves and putting it into practice and assessing. I work a lot on people with mindset and mindfulness and what are the things that we need to be doing on a daily basis to support all these things that are important in our lives.
Mm.
And
That's
how people
awesome.
can find me
Yes,
is
you've
with
read my
I
mind.
forgot about that. So
No, you read my mind.
I'm on Instagram at Gormy Goes Keto, and I'm also on X at Gormy Goes Keto. But as far as like seeing more about my programs, obviously you can go on there and look at the link in bio, as cliche and dumb as that is now. But you can also go to theketoroad.com, and my coaching programs are all on theketoroad.com. I also create recipes and write blogs on there, so there's a ton of content of things that I've written. So even if you're interested in seeing my philosophy and how I operate, you can really dive into that blog page because 90% of it is written by me. So you can take a look and see my thoughts on different things and see if we resonate. But you can also contact me through the website and set up a free consultation. I do free calls with people, and I will say probably 50% of them, the person knows at the end of the conversation that they probably can't afford coaching or take it on at this time, but they're looking for that discussion just to help them kind of get themselves like in order of seeing what might be a good tool for them. So I love having those conversations with people as well. And you can also set that up, just by dropping me a DM or reaching out through the website.
Dude, thank you for meeting with me today. You're an important person in my life. I appreciate you a lot, dude.
Well, I appreciate you too. And I love what you're doing on here, man. And I would love to come back and talk about anything else you ever want to talk about.
Let's definitely hold a reserved spot in the future. Okay.
Definitely.
All right, pal. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, man.
All right. I'll message you soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, champ.
Bye.
Love you, pal. Bye.